Ginetta Juniors stepped away from their British GT package last month to head to Croft. It was a weekend on which the current championship leader Rocco Coronel could have wrapped up the championship. However, it wasn't to be for the Dutchman after an unfortunate incident in race 1 saw him drop to last on the road early doors. While Coronel delivered an outstanding comeback drive to finish 8th, his championship rival Fred Green claimed the all-important first win of the weekend and the points he needed to continue the championship fight. Race 2 saw Green deliver another standout performance to make it 2 wins out of 2 after a race-long battle with George Proudfoot that included a nail-biting final lap dice. Coronel came home in 3rd to claim the last step of the podium. The rain came in the 3rd and final race of the weekend to spice up proceedings even further, but again Green was on a mission and completed his hat-trick of victories at Croft. Coronel battled hard with his teammate Scott Lindblom all race long, but the Dutchman had to settle once again for 3rd after Lindblom was able to cross the line just in front at the flag. So, after a standout weekend for Fred Green, all is now set for a deciding weekend of racing here at Donington Park. So the stage is set this afternoon, potentially for a new name to be added to the long and illustrious list of champions in the Ginetta Junior Championship, with Rocco Coronel aiming now to cap off what has been a phenomenal season with a championship it could well be won in this very first race of the weekend. They'll have 3 races in total, 1 today, 2 tomorrow, and we know that he is in a very, very comfortable position. Essentially, Fred Green, his nearest championship rival, must outscore Rocco Coronel in this race by 13 points to stay in title contention. So in other words, if Rocco loses less than 13 points, then he will be the champion before we get into the 2 races tomorrow. Rather selfishly, I'd like it to go down to the wire, because there is the temptation, isn't there, then, for Rocco to not bother racing tomorrow, which would be his prerogative, but I'd like to see him out there with nothing to lose and a championship already settled. We'll wait and see what decision he decides to take, but there is the Red Bull Junior driver, the son of Tom Coronel, legend of touring car racing, sports car racing, etc. himself. And I'm sure that Tom is here this weekend cheering on his young son, who so far has done everything right, because he starts on pole position for this one, and that was after a really, really strong qualifying performance earlier on today. The Ginetta Junior qualifying format is a tricky one, because it gives the drivers only 3 flying laps in which to set a time. In fact, in which to set 2 times, because your fastest time sets the grid for race 1, your second fastest lap time sets the grid for race number 2. Rocco Coronel has, I believe, managed to go and get pole position provisionally in both of those races. Rocco then on pole. George Proudfoot, with whom Fred Green battled for a win last time out at Croft, starts 2nd. Max Cuthbert and Fred Green start on row number 2, with Jarrett Clark and Torrin Byrne on row 3. An awful lot of our racing cars up at the front of the grid, aren't there? Scott Lindblom is 7th, and Lewis Goff starts alongside him on row 4. Row 5 then for Harry Bartle and Ethan Carney, and that will complete the top 10. Row 6 for Colin Cronin. Further down, I would argue, than you'd expect for the Irishman, with Noah Young for company. Row 7, Josh Watts and Jesse Phillips for Project R. Joshua Henry and Revy Lake are together on row number 8 of the grid. Then it is Emilio Del Grosso and Andrew Robinson, one of a number of rookies debuting this weekend. Matthew Chihuahua and Henry Cameron are on the penultimate row of the grid, and it is Vladislav Tomenchuk at the back of the 21 car grid. Good to see a few new names bolstering the grid. We often see this, I suppose, don't we, at the end of the season, with drivers perhaps with an eye towards next year, looking at having a go in the Ginetta Junior Championship as a bit of a sampler this weekend, and then heading into the full season campaign in 2026. So our racing driver Rocco Coronel looking for a drivers' championship. Our racing also looking to secure the team's championship in this one. They need to score only 17 points in this race to be provisionally crowned the team's champion, and that should be doable, you'd imagine. You get 35 points for winning a race, and Rocco Coronel will be aiming for that very much, won't he, at the end of this race. However, what I will just caveat all of this with is that this is Donington Park and this is the Ginetta Junior Championship. This circuit in particular does tend to provide some, let's call it lively Ginetta Junior races. It's very slipstream-centric, this track. It's got a very high average speed for the first 2/3 of the lap, and then you get onto the Grand Prix loop, the Melbourne loop. The two big braking zones into the Melbourne hairpin and the Goddard's hairpin at the end of the lap are a great place for an opportunistic dive bomb move to be made. And we saw, in fact, at the start of the year, Rocco Coronel had what was at the time his worst weekend of the season, because he had by what would become his very, very high standards, a little bit of a disappointing time. Got caught up in a couple of incidents, I seem to remember, in the first race and finished off the podium. He did then win the other two races, but the fact that that still is probably his second lowest weekend of the season goes to show just how well he's been doing through the middle part of the year. Right, back of the grid is in position. Green flag will wave. Rocco Coronel and George Proudfoot-Nalder make up the front row of the grid as the first race of the weekend gets underway. It's a not brilliant start from Rocco, actually. George Proudfoot-Nalder, I would say, with a better launch. Yes, has his nose ahead on the outside line, and in fact has a full car ahead as we approach the braking zone at the first corner. That is Max Cuthbert tucking in behind his teammate Rocco Coronel, and Fred Green round the outside. Fred Green, the white and black car, will be shown absolutely no respect by Max Cuthbert, who I'm sure will be trying to act as rear gunner here to his teammate Rocco Coronel. Remember, if you're new to the championship this year, just tuning in for the final round, the R Racing cars, the sort of gunmetal grey with the fluorescent highlights, they are running in the same team as Rocco Coronel and Scott Lindblom in the Red Bull liveries. They still are racing cars, even though they run that Red Bull Junior paint scheme. So second and third place cars at the moment, very much teammates. George Proudfoot-Nalder, though, with absolutely no loyalties to championship contenders, running for MDD. Out wide there goes Torin Byrne, and bounces back through the gravel trap. Didn't actually lose that much time with that wayward moment at McLean's, but does open the door slightly for Bartle to slip through on the inside. It's a 4-car breakaway so far, though. George Proudfoot-Nalder, the Aussie, leads the way, with Rocco Coronel, Max Cuthbert, and then Fred Green, second, third, and fourth, respectively. And George Proudfoot-Nalder really seemed to lose ground down the second half of the exhibition straight. That was a little bit odd. Could have been the slipstream, I suppose. They're driving into a headwind down the back straight and down the pit straight as well, which exaggerates that slipstream effect. Here comes Fred Green, look to the inside of Cuthbert. That's significant. That's for third. In fact, he's up the inside of Rocco Coronel as well for second. They're 4 wide further back. That's never going to work, surely, the Melbourne hairpin. Well, they settle it back down to a much more sensible 3 abreast situation, and all, thankfully, live to tell the tale. But Fred Green goes third. So Fred Green now on the tail of his teammate, Rocco Coronel, his teammate, the championship rival, Rocco Coronel, and he is the Elite Motorsport filling in that R Racing sandwich, if you like, in the second, third, and fourth place battle. Cars sideways and scattering further back. All over the grass on the outside line was Colin Cronin, who's lost further ground now after what was already quite a disappointing qualifying session. There's a bit of argy-bargy there involving Ethan Carney and Harry Bartle in the 73 as they head through Redgate Corner. So Fred Green now sets about, in a way, part 1 of his job in this race. Well, part 1 was getting past Max Cuthbert. He's done that. Part 2 is getting ahead of Rocco Coronel. Part 3 is then trying to get cars between himself and Rocco Coronel, because for Fred Green, simply beating Rocco in this race is not enough. If Fred Green were to win the race, then I think he needs Rocco Coronel off the podium in order to take the championship to the next race. There you can see, as it stands, 638 points for Coronel, but that's already changing because Green has gone through. Fred Green goes through at McLean's corner. Rocco Coronel fights back to the inside line, though, and will try to reclaim the position at Coppice corner. Fred decides to sort of stand his ground on the outside line, risks getting shuffled out of line. There's a touch there between he and Max Cuthbert, and I think there'd already been a little one between he and Rocco Coronel as well, and Fred Green, just as quickly as he gains second place, drops back to third. That is Josh Watts off, I believe, isn't it, in the all-white number 22 car. Sort of bounces his way back through the gravel trap and rejoins the fray. Out of the chicane we go. All of this is playing beautifully into the hands of George Proudfoot-Nalder, though, isn't it? Who is looking for win number 1 of the season. He's had a handful of podium finishes, the most recent one of those coming at Croft last time out, but he would love to get a race win here in the final event of the season. Ethan Carney loses out to first Harry Bartle and then potentially Torin Byrne as well, who gets up alongside in the second of the Pace Performance cars. If you look in Ginetta Junior Racing, though, there is almost always a battle to be enjoyed, and this battle at the front is gaining more and more participants, isn't it? George Proudfoot-Nalder isn't really massively escaping. You've then got Rocco Coronel, Fred Green and Max Cuthbert, who have now been joined by Scott Lindblom and by Jarrett Clark, I should say, in behind. Now, the issue here, if you're Fred Green, is that he is absolutely surrounded by R-Racing drivers. George Proudfoot-Nalder isn't an R-Racing driver, he's an MDD Motorsport driver, but then Coronel, Cuthbert, Lindblom and Clark are all teammates. And regardless of the championship situation, that's not a good position to be in for Fred. He's got no help up there. The next of his teammates is well down the order. Ethan Carney in 9th is the next best Elite Motorsport driver. And so for Fred Green, he's probably feeling a little bit lonely at the front, and he's got to try and take the fight to Rocco Coronel. And even bigger picture than that, even if he does get past Coronel, there's not very much chance that Rocco will fall behind all of his teammates. You would imagine there will probably be some element of teamwork here. Fred Green's hunting around behind Rocco as they turn through Coppice Corner. We've got the rear view here from Rocco Coronel's car. And where does Fred Green go? He's got the run, but he daren't go to the outside line because he's got all of these R-Racing cars queuing up behind him. Finds a gap, does he, to the inside? Oh, there's a tap in the tail of Rocco Coronel as they head into the chicane. And Fred Green has to back out of it. Snap of opposite lock on the way in, avoids the tyre stack on the way out. Is this his opportunity to make a move? No, because Rocco Coronel gets to the inside line and will go right to the white line on driver's right to cover that move. Cuthbert, though, he's up the inside of Fred Green, and he will go through, I think, and might bring Scott Lindblom with him as well. He'll shuffle Fred Green out wide, and Scott Lindblom, I think, could get past at least one, maybe both of them, but that is 2 places lost by Fred Green, and this is exactly what my concern was. Oh, speaking of concerns, Andrew Robinson's car is sustained quite a bit of damage at the chicane by the looks of it, and I'm not convinced he's going to get that car out of the way, so this might require a safety car period if that is the case. But yeah, for Fred Green, no help certainly from teammates of his own. He's surrounded by people who are teammates of Rocco Coronel's. I just don't think he's going to be shown any respect at all. I don't think they'll do anything dirty, but as we saw there, when he was on the outside line at the hairpin, he was shuffled out to the edge of the road and ended up losing 2 positions. He's got to be very, very careful with how he handles this situation. In a way, the best thing that could happen really for Fred Green here is a safety car. That would bring other people into this battle and maybe split up some of the R-Racing brigade that he's now battling with. So Coronel then second, Cuthbert third. I would be surprised if Max Cuthbert decides to go on the attack. That's good news for George Proudfoot-Nalder, certainly the race leader, because that is Andrew Robinson's car being pushed, or driven, in fact, out of harm's way, so that shouldn't need a safety car. The reason I say that's good news for George Proudfoot-Nalder is he's 1.8 seconds clear of this almighty battle for second. But is it a battle for second, or is it just the Rocco Coronel train? Well, Scott Lindblom there was sideways third car in that train. Is Max Cuthbert going to try and overtake his teammate? Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Well, now that is a surprise. Max Cuthbert then to the inside of Rocco Coronel, and Scott Lindblom might well go with him. Yes, he will, and leans on his teammate and puts him in the gravel. Rocco Coronel straight across the gravel track. Now he rejoins in front of Scott Lindblom still. Fred Green gesticulating at Jarrett Clark, that is, behind him to give him some help, and Fred is up the inside of everybody. He's up the inside of Rocco Coronel. Where did that come from? Fred Green dives to the inside of 2 cars. He will lose a position to Clark, on the exit of the corner. Jarrett Clark gains 3 places out of all of that, but that all sparked from Max Cuthbert overtaking Coronel, and Coronel's lost another one now, has he? Lindblom goes round the outside. Well, I stand corrected then. The R-Racing drivers are in this for themselves, and they are not seemingly going to just move aside and help Rocco Coronel win a championship. Far from it. So Fred Green might have a glimmer of hope here still then. He's battling hard. He's ahead of Lindblom. He's ahead of Coronel. And he's now chasing after Jarrett Clark. There is the race leader, George Proudfoot-Nalder. Max Cuthbert second. Clark onto the podium places now in third. And then it is Fred Green in fourth. Now, this is not yet enough to take the championship to the second race tomorrow. He needs to get some more cars between himself and Rocco Coronel. But he's closing back in on Jarrett Clark, is Fred Green. And he'll get a nice slipstream now up the hill, through Starkeys, through Schwantz Curve, both of which are easily flat-out left-handers. And there is an opportunity maybe to overtake when we arrive at the first of these right-handers at McLean's. Is he up the inside? I think he is. So Fred Green goes for another move against Jarrett Clark and goes through. So that's now 2 cars between himself and Rocco Coronel. Those two cars, though, are side by side, and as we can see from Rocco's view, that might give him a chance to gain another position. It will, because Lindblom goes past Jarrett Clark, and so too now does Rocco Coronel. Limiting the damage. All Rocco needs to do is follow Fred Green and stay within a position or two of him, and he will be the champion. Fred now having to go defensive into the chicane. Scott Lindblom settles in behind him. Oh, Fred really had to slow it down, just about manages to avoid the tyre stack, but look how slow he was on corner exit. Rocco Coronel gets to the inside of both of them and might do to Scott Lindblom and Fred Green what Green did to him a lap ago. Fred Green is very late on the brakes on the outside, but ultimately has no way of getting back to the inside line, and Rocco Coronel slips back past the lot of them. Fred Green suddenly is right at the back of the pack again. It's changing by the lap, this, and on this occasion it changes in the favour of Rocco Coronel, who slides the car into the Goddard's hairpin and is back now into an important third position. Green, though, slips back ahead of Jarrett Clark, seemingly with ease at the final hairpin there. I think Jarrett had slipped wide at the left-hander. Right back on board then with Fred Green. Is there a move to be made into Redgate corner? Answer no, because Scott Lindblom puts an absolute send on Rocco Coronel. That was a really aggressive move. Rocco gets the switchback, gets back alongside his Red Bull teammate, and this could, again, benefit Fred Green, who gives the bumper look to Coronel through Hollywood. That's not aggressive driving, it is bump drafting, something we see quite a lot of in Ginetta Junior racing. It pushes Coronel through and it opens the door for Fred Green to do the same at the bottom of the hill. So Fred Green then, once again, back ahead of Scott Lindblom. There's just no sort of sense of order in this battle pack, is there, though? You can get to the front of it one lap and be at the back of it the next. So it's going to be a difficult job here for Fred Green, I think, to get the required number of cars between himself and Rocco Coronel, especially because they've allowed Cuthbert and Proudfoot Nalder to escape out in front. So they're no longer a part of this scrap. The next cars behind are Max Barthel and the number 4 car, actually, of Lewis Goff, who continues to impress in this part-season campaign. But they are the best part of 3 seconds back, or they were at the start of the lap. Into the chicane we go. Fred Green, ooh, into the back of Rocco there. There's that pushed Coronel wide. He's very sideways. They both nearly hit the tyre stack. And again, it's the third car in line that gets the best run. Scott Lindblom elbows his way up the inside of Fred Green and will, I think, maybe get that place away. Rocco Coronel covers the inside nicely. Jarrett Clark goes around the outside. And again, it's 2 places lost for Fred Green. That chicane and the run into the Melbourne hairpin, that is the key area, isn't it? That is the area of the racetrack that is going to decide this race, I think. Not necessarily on this lap, but when we get to the final lap or two, that could be pivotal, couldn't it? What position you're in at the chicane and what position you can put yourself into exiting the Melbourne hairpin. So Coronel back to third now. I don't think there's been a single lap in this race where this lot have remained in the same order. At the front of the pack, by the way, 3.2 seconds now is the margin first to second. It's growing for George Proudfoot Nalder as we ride on board with Coronel defending there from Jarrett Clark, who gives him the hurry up on the apex. And Jarrett Clark settles back in line behind this. Fascinating situation, this. We so often are accustomed to seeing teammates work together, particularly at the end of the season, but in junior racing, I just don't think that is in their vocabulary. Everyone is paid to be on the grid. Everyone is trying to kickstart their racing career. And, well, they want to try and get the best race result that they possibly can. At the moment, though, Rocco Coronel would provisionally be the champion on 634 points. Fred Green, 572. But that again changes as Jarrett Clark hits Rocco Coronel at McLean's. That stacks them all back together again. And Fred Green looks to the inside of Scott Lindblom. There's no room there, though, because Lindblom is busy making a move on his teammate Jarrett Clark, who, again, slips out a little bit wide. Fred Green now tries to nuzzle up alongside Scott Lindblom's car, and I think they've now invited Harry Bartle to the party, haven't they? Yes, they have. 3 abreast into the chicane. This isn't going to work, surely, and Fred Green is in the most precarious position of all, on the outside of both of those cars to the left. Is he going to sweep through? No, can't make the corner. He and Scott Lindblom both have to go across the gravel, and, well, Fred Green certainly didn't lose any ground from that, did he? Here comes Bartle, gets a big squeeze onto the grass from Scott Lindblom, and did a really good job of catching that. Lindblom then converts that very aggressive defensive manoeuvre into an overtake and dives back to the inside of Jarrett Clark on the run down into the Melbourne hairpin. So into the left-hander at Goddard's we come, and once again the 2 title contenders are together more or less. Scott Lindblom, Jarrett Clark, and as I said, now Harry Bartle, the number 73 car, joining in the fun. 5-second penalties for cars 5 and 53. 5 is Emilio Del Grosso, 53 is Ethan Carney. They were 12th and 13th respectively at the moment, with 5-second time penalties for, guess what, exceeding track limits, mean that they will drop further down the order at the end of the race. George Prout-Fernelda, though, what a brilliant performance this has been from the Aussie. He's come close a few times in the last few rounds to a maiden race victory, always falling just short, often being defeated by one of those two title protagonists. Well, he's managed to distance himself from those drivers in this one, and indeed keeping Max Cuthbert at bay to the tune of 3.6 seconds now. And so he looks well on his way now, with just over a quarter of the race still to go. Well on his way to a race victory. What about Rocco Coronel, though? Has he got one hand on the championship trophy, or is there a late sting in the tail in this race? He certainly won't be able to fall back upon the support of his teammates, and with Fred Green now starting to close back in on him, I suspect it's going to feel like a very long 5 minutes, final 5 minutes of this race for the championship leader. Drive into that headwind down the exhibition straight. The slipstream will bring them back together quite dramatically. Look at the way Fred Green reels in Rocco Coronel in the second half of the straight, and there's now only a Ginetta G40's length between them. They both keep it within the track limit this time at the Fogarty S's. And is Fred Green going to try and make something happen into the Melbourne hairpin? He's sort of faking to the outside, making Rocco think there's no need to defend, but Rocco's not falling for that one and covers the inside line into the right-hander. Fred, an armful of opposite lock there as he tries to pick the throttle up at the ideal moment, carry the speed up the hill into Goddard's. And I don't think he's going to be close enough to have a go here. Thinks about it, or more tries to distract Rocco Coronel with the sudden flash of movement to the inside. But we've seen Rocco Coronel's racecraft has been pretty much bulletproof, hasn't it, this season? The only issues he's ever had, really, have come through poor qualifying. Last time out at Croft, he had by his standards, pretty terrible qualifying session that put him in the middle of the pack, and from there he struggled a little bit. But generally, when he's near the front like this, he is a tough nut to crack, and he is proving that once again. This defensive driving, though, that he's putting in is bringing Scott Lindblom back onto their tail, and not much further back are Jarrett Clark and Harry Bartle. So Fred Green will be, actually for once, grateful to see those R-Racing cars steaming up behind him, because they are potential cars that could get between them. But actually, Scott Lindblom, with a really opportunistic move there, carried good momentum off the old hairpin and tucks in behind his teammate Rocco Coronel to move ahead of Fred Green. Jarrett Clark attempts to do the same as well. But Scott Lindblom already, pushing Rocco Coronel up through McLean's corner, is trying to give his Red Bull Racing junior teammate the hurry up. Going on behind, Fred Green, I think, has seen off the challenge from Jarrett Clark. Yes, he has. And so only the one place lost for Fred, but now we have a group of cars together. And there is a possibility here that Rocco Coronel could end up losing some ground. Scott Lindblom there waving at Rocco to say don't defend, interestingly. He was pointing to the outside edge of the track because Rocco was sort of driving defensively, and Scott didn't want him to do that because that leaves him vulnerable then to attack from Fred Green. So maybe now there is a little bit of teamwork going on, although they didn't have the best run out of the chicane. So Fred Green closes back in and thinks about the inside line. So too did Lindblom, although I think more in reaction to Fred Green's movement. It's Rocco, though, that misses the apex and runs a bit wide. Holds on to the position, though, on corner exit. We're going to be starting this time the penultimate lap of the race, I think. So 2 more laps remain. And Fred Green is now starting to get a bit frustrated, maybe. He can't find a way past Scott Lindblom, who suddenly is looking an awful lot more defensive than attacking, isn't he, in his driving style. Body language of car 8 says that he's focusing maybe more on keeping Fred Green behind now than he is getting ahead of Rocco Coronel, who still, as it stands, is on course to wrap the championship up with 2 races to spare. But that could all change if Fred Green theoretically could get to the front of this group and Rocco were to lose some more places. It could rumble on to Sunday. 2 more drivers now being given track limit penalties, by the way. 22, Josh Watts, and 75, which is Colin Cronin, both being added to the track limits naughty list. And through the old hairpin comes this 3rd place battle. Easy to forget that we've got George Prout-Fernelda and Max Cuthbert off into the distance, but they are now 5 seconds apart from each other, so you're missing nothing at the front of the field. They're another 5 seconds then ahead of this battle for the bottom step of the podium. And Rocco Coronel now maybe just starting to weather the storm. And again, we've seen in the past when he's hit the front of the field, or at least the front of a group of cars, he generally in the closing stages is quite good at staying there. So not to imagine He will be feeling a little calmer now, maybe. There's one more lap to go after this one. What's Lindblom going to do here down the back straight? Gives the push to Rocco. So he is not going to try and attack for the time being. Very cool and calm adjustments of the, oh my word, of the rear view mirror for Fred Green, and then Rocco Coronel nearly throws it all away. How did he avoid that tyre stat? Well, he did, but he's lost a position to Fred Green. He might now allow some of the other cars behind to come through as well. Oh, Lindblom is sideways, and up the inside goes Harry Bartle. Harry Bartle gets past Jarrett Clark and forces Coronel out wide. This is now all of a sudden right back into the danger zone for the championship leader, who cannot afford a non-finish. That would be a real hit in his championship hopes. He does not want to slip down the order here too far, because that could just allow Fred Green to take this battle to the final day of the season. Onto the final lap of the race we go, and that is Ethan Carney. Well, a track limits penalty is now the least of his worries. That car has sustained significant damage and is parked at the edge of the road, definitely in a place of danger, I would argue, at the exit of the chicane. He is okay, that's good news. The Elite Motorsport driver gets out of what's left of his Elite Motorsport car. But that will mean yellow flags out at the chicane for the final lap, and that's significant because that's really been the action spot, hasn't it, all race long. Thankfully for George Proudfoot Nalder, the majority of his action came in the first 30 seconds or so of the race. He's on course for a dominant maiden victory in the championship. This is what happened to Ethan Carney. Oh, hit the first of the tyre stacks. That destroys the steering. And Josh Wattslook nearly does the same to the right-hand element of the chicane. Ethan Carney, though, goes for a spin through the discarded bits of gravel which get fired at the scenery. Very spectacular, super slow-mo shots, but not footage that Ethan Carney will be in any particular hurry to watch back, I fear. Nor the Elite Motorsport team, who are already starting to calculate exactly how late their night is about to be as they try to get that car race ready again for tomorrow. Right, George Proudfoot Nalder, this is a big moment in a season that's been dominated by Rocco Coronel and Fred Green. They have done almost all of the winning. Alfie Slater won 3 races earlier in the season, including, interestingly, the very first race of the season here at... Oh no, hang on, George Proudfoot Nalder's... The engine's gone, has it? That is a huge amount of smoke from the back of George Proudfoot Nalder's car, and he's out! The race leader is out with a corner to go, and Max Cuthbert is going to pick up his first race win in the championship. I cannot believe it. George Proudfoot Nalder is robbed of victory. Max Cuthbert gets the win, and there goes George Proudfoot Nalder. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Head in his hands, and quite rightly so. He had done everything right, and well, his race ends in incredibly smoky fashion, and he is understandably enormously emotional about that. Wow, what a dramatic conclusion to the race. The MDD squad can't believe what they're seeing. That is absolutely astonishing. And, well, I feel a little bit bad now for picking him up so much on that last lap, because I honestly thought that nothing could possibly go wrong. But this is motor racing. There is always the potential for late drama. And I'm so sorry to say that that means George Proudfoot Nalder will not get his first victory. And this is why it is a very, very rare thing to see a mechanical issue on a Ginetta. But that is clearly something fairly significant that's gone wrong under the bonnet, and that car didn't even have any forward drive from that point on, and he couldn't even limp home to the flag. So Max Cuthbert wins the race, Fred Green ends up second, Scott Lindblom third, and Rocco Coronel in fourth. Now, I think that is enough for Rocco Coronel to be crowned the champion. And yes, getting some confirmation of that now. Provisionally, Rocco Coronel is your overall and rookie class champion in the Ginetta Junior Championship. Our racing wrap up the teams championship as well. Getting 4 cars inside the top 5 ought to do that. But Rocco Coronel's championship winning moment after all that tension and build-up over the last few rounds. We thought he was going to win it at Croft last time out, and then he had a not brilliant weekend by his standards. It rolled on to Donington Park, and in the end, his big shining moment winning the championship is sort of outshone in a way by George Proudfoot Nalder's spectacular demise from the race, with a corner standing between himself and a race win. Well, absolutely remarkable last lap turn of events, but Rocco Coronel provisionally is your 2025 Ginetta Junior Champion. Max Cuthbert gets the race win. That I did not expect to be saying 2 corners from home, but he will gladly accept his first victory in the championship. Fred Green did everything he could there. It was a real fighting drive to second place, but it's not going to be enough, it seems, to take the championship to the final 2 races tomorrow. Scott Lindblom finishes in 3rd, and Rocco Coronel off the podium, but we believe has done enough to wrap up the championship with 2 races to spare. Jarrett Clark in 5th, Lewis Goff in 6th, Noah Young 7th, Harry Bartle was 8th with Colin Cronin, and Revy Lake completing the top 10. Revy started 16th. That's a good effort from the Elite Motorsport driver. Emilio Del Grosso was 11th, ahead of Josh Watson, Torin Byrne. Henry Cameron, Matthew Chihuahua, Josh Henry, Jesse Phillips were next, ahead of Vladislav Tomenchuk, with George Proudfoot-Nalder a non-finisher in dramatic fashion on the final lap of the race. Ethan Carney, of course, was a non-finisher as well. And at the back, Andrew Robinson in 21st place. Well, the first race of the weekend here at Donington Park was certainly a memorable one. It was a brilliant start from George Proudfoot-Nalder, who got around the pole sitter and champion in waiting, Rocco Coronel, before they even arrived at the first corner. Fred Green was immediately on his toes, trying to go after Rocco Coronel, knowing that he had to beat his title rival by a number of positions to take the championship to the final 2 races. Rocco, in fairness, though, was not having things all his own way. Fred Green got past him quite early on with a move up at McLean's. Rocco, though, fought back immediately, and with the arrival of all of the other R-Racing cars, teammates of Rocco Coronel's, it really seemed like the tide was turning against Fred Green. Those R-Racing drivers then started to take the fight to Fred and dutifully started shuffling him down the order, seemingly content to play rear gunner to Rocco Coronel. That, though, was not the case. The likes of Scott Lindblom, Jarrett Clark, Max Cuthbert, they started battling with Rocco, and it set about this sensational battle for 3rd position. On any given moment, there was a genuine chance that Fred Green could have managed to get enough cars between himself and Rocco Coronel and take the fight to tomorrow, but Rocco, every time he got knocked down, was able to fight his way back to the front of that group. And even with some assistance late on from his teammate Scott Lindblom that nearly ended in tears at the chicane, it was in the end enough for Rocco to do exactly what he needed to do. George Proudfoot-Nalder dominated the race. He was nearly 5 seconds up the road onto the final lap, and then with just 1 corner to go, the car slowed, smoke emanated from the back of it, and he ended up not reaching the checkered flag. Max Cuthbert it was then who claimed the win, as Rocco Coronel claimed the championship.
What happened in the last few laps? I don't know.
And there is Rocco Coronel down in Parc Ferme, putting his winner's, well, not actually a winner's cap on, because he wasn't even on the podium, but he is a champion, and I think that is an accolade that he will be very, very happy to take. Rocco Coronel looks remarkably calm. He maybe doesn't know for sure what the title calculations are. We are getting the notification from Ginetta that he is provisionally the champion, but I wonder whether he's even aware of that just now. He is certainly not looking all that flustered by it, and considering the absolute battle that he had in that race, he looks particularly cool and calm, and he has now a bit of a smile on his face as it all starts to sink in. Right, 2 races to go tomorrow. Tune in to see what happens here at Donington.